My brother inherited 12 profitable coffee shops across Colorado, 3 commercial buildings in downtown Denver, and a business that generated more than $4.8 million a year in revenue. I inherited 47 acres of empty land that nobody wanted. 5 years later, my brother stood in front of a judge, trying to prove that I had stolen the family fortune from him. The judge disagreed. So did the bank. So did the county. And most importantly, so did the documents bearing my father's signature. But none of that had happened yet. Back then, on a cold afternoon in October 2018, everyone in the room was convinced that my brother had won and that I had lost. Including me. My name is Emily Carter. I was 28 years old when my father divided his estate. My brother Jason was 32. For as long as I could remember, Jason had been treated as the future of the family, while I had been treated as someone who would eventually find a stable job, get married, and disappear into an ordinary life. Nobody ever said it directly. They didn't have to. You learn these things from 1,000 small moments. The way relatives ask your brother about his plans while asking you about your dating life. The way your father invites him to business meetings but never invites you. The way every achievement you make is considered nice, while every achievement he makes is considered important. By the time I turned 28, I had stopped fighting it. I worked as a marketing manager for a regional grocery company in Denver. I earned $82,000 a year. I rented a small apartment. I paid my bills. I lived a quiet life. Meanwhile, Jason had spent 4 years working inside our father's coffee business. Everyone assumed he would eventually take over, including Jason himself. The announcement happened during my father's 63rd birthday party. More than 40 people attended. Family members, business partners, old friends, employees. The private dining room overlooked downtown Denver. I still remember the lights reflecting off the windows. I still remember the smell of roasted coffee because my father had brought samples from his newest location earlier that day. Most of all, I remember the moment everything changed. My father stood and tapped his glass. The room fell silent. "My health isn't what it used to be," he said. Several people laughed nervously. Nobody liked hearing that, especially because he looked perfectly healthy. Then he continued, "So it's time to make decisions about the future." Jason smiled immediately. He already knew. I could see it on his face. He wasn't surprised. He was waiting. My father opened a leather folder. "The coffee company will be transferred to Jason." Applause erupted around the room. People stood. Some cheered. One of my father's longtime managers actually shook Jason's hand before Dad had even finished speaking. 12 coffee shops, 2 roasting facilities, 3 commercial properties, hundreds of employees, years of goodwill, years of customer loyalty. Everything. Jason was getting all of it. I sat quietly. Not because I was angry. Because I assumed there was more. There had to be. Then my father looked at me. "And Emily." The room became quiet again. I smiled politely. He slid a second folder across the table. "This is yours." I opened it. 47 acres. Elbert County, Colorado. Approximately 70 miles east of Denver. Undeveloped land. No buildings. No utilities. No active agricultural operations. No existing revenue. Assessed value, $312,000. For several seconds, I genuinely thought there must be additional paperwork. Maybe another property. Maybe investment accounts. Maybe something had been left out. I flipped through every page. Nothing. That was it. Jason received assets worth nearly $18 million. I received vacant land worth $300,000. The difference was so absurd that my brain struggled to process it. My mother spoke before I could. "Your father chose what made sense." Made sense. I remember those words clearly, because they hurt more than the inheritance itself. "What does that mean?" I asked. Dad leaned back. "It means Jason understands the business." I stared at him. "And I don't?" His expression remained calm. "You're talented, Emily. Whenever people begin a sentence with those words, something unpleasant usually follows. You've always been hardworking. But you're not an entrepreneur. The room became painfully quiet. Nobody intervened. Nobody disagreed. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked embarrassed. Jason looked satisfied. That was worse. Not because he had won, because he believed he deserved to win, as if the outcome had been obvious all along, as if I had never been a serious contender, as if I had never belonged in the conversation. I left 15 minutes later. Nobody stopped me. Not even my father. That should have told me everything. 3 weeks later, I drove to see the land. The property sat near a rural highway outside a tiny Colorado town with fewer than 800 residents. The nearest gas station was 12 miles away. The nearest grocery store was 20 miles away. Most people would have called the location terrible. At first glance, I agreed. The grass was dry. The fencing was broken. There were no structures, except an abandoned shed that looked ready to collapse. The place seemed forgotten, like something the world had abandoned years earlier. I spent nearly 4 hours walking the property. Then something happened. Not dramatic, not magical, just practical. I started paying attention. The highway wasn't heavily traveled, but it wasn't empty either. Hundreds of vehicles passed every day. Several new housing developments were being built closer to Denver. Land prices in neighboring counties had doubled over the previous decade. The area sat directly between expanding suburban corridors. Suddenly, the property looked different. Not valuable. Not yet. But possible. That night I returned home and started researching. County planning documents. Development forecasts. Infrastructure projects. Population growth estimates. Commercial expansion plans. For the next 6 weeks, I studied every public record I could find. And slowly a realization emerged. Everyone was evaluating the land based on what it was. Nobody was evaluating it based on what it could become. That included my father. That included Jason. That included almost every person who had attended that birthday dinner. And that realization planted a dangerous thought inside my head. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe all of them were wrong. Maybe the empty land wasn't the consolation prize. Maybe it was an opportunity nobody else had noticed. The more I researched, the more obsessed I became. By January 2019, I had filled 3 notebooks with projections. By February, I had a business plan. By March, I made a decision that scared me more than anything I had ever done. I quit my job. Every person in my family thought I was insane, including my mother. Especially Jason. When he heard about it, he called me immediately. "What are you doing?" "I'm building something." On that dirt field, I looked at the plans spread across my kitchen table. Road access, commercial zoning possibilities, agritourism concepts, future retail space, long-term development options. Yes. Jason laughed. Actually laughed. "I've got 12 profitable coffee shops and you're gambling your future on weeds." I remember exactly what I told him. Maybe. Then I hung up. At the time, neither of us understood that the next 5 years would completely reverse our positions. Because while Jason was busy protecting what he had inherited, I was about to begin creating something nobody had inherited at all. And that difference would eventually change everything. The first bank rejected me in 11 minutes. I remember because I sat in my car afterward and stared at the rejection email while rain hammered against the windshield of my Honda Civic, wondering whether my father had been right all along. Insufficient collateral. That was the official explanation. The second bank rejected me 3 days later. The third never even called back. By April 2019, I had quit my job, burned through nearly $12,000 in savings preparing development plans, and discovered something that nobody talks about when they tell inspirational business stories. Believing in yourself is free. Building something costs money. Lot of money. Money I didn't have. I spent almost 2 months meeting lenders, county officials, land use consultants, agricultural specialists, and commercial development advisors. Every meeting ended the same way. People liked my enthusiasm. People liked my research. People liked my determination. Nobody wanted to risk their money. One consultant in Denver summed it up perfectly. "Emily, your vision is interesting." Whenever someone says interesting during a business meeting, They're usually trying to avoid saying, terrible. He continued. The problem isn't whether this could work. Then what's the problem? The problem is that it might take years. Years. That word followed me everywhere. Investors wanted fast returns. Banks wanted security. Developers wanted proven markets. Nobody wanted uncertainty. The only person who seemed genuinely excited was a 62-year-old county planner named Robert Hughes. He invited me into his office one afternoon and spent nearly 2 hours reviewing maps with me. Near the end of our conversation, he pointed toward a transportation proposal scheduled for review the following year. A new state highway expansion. Nothing guaranteed, nothing approved. But if it happened, traffic through the region would increase dramatically. Most people aren't paying attention to this, he told me. Why? He smiled. Because most people don't read planning documents. I drove home that night feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real hope. Not because success was guaranteed, because possibility existed. And possibility was enough. The loan finally came through in July. Not from a major bank. Not from an investor. Not from anyone I expected. A regional agricultural lender approved a $410,000 development package after reviewing my business plan, projected cash flows, and land valuation. The interest rate was awful. The repayment schedule was terrifying. I signed anyway. My hands actually shook while I signed. One signature. Then another. Then another. By the time I left the office, I owed more money than I had earned during the previous 5 years combined. I should have felt terrified. Instead, I felt alive. For the first time, the dream wasn't a spreadsheet. It was real. The first year was brutal. There is no glamorous way to describe it. I didn't become an entrepreneur. I became a laborer, a mechanic, a bookkeeper, a project manager, a landscaper, a janitor, a security guard. Sometimes all in the same day. I moved into a used travel trailer on the property because commuting from Denver consumed too much time and too much money. The trailer cost $8,900. The air conditioning barely worked. The water system constantly broke. The bathroom smelled strange no matter how often I cleaned it. But it was mine. Every morning I woke up surrounded by 47 acres of possibility. Every evening I went to sleep exhausted. The first infrastructure improvements alone nearly destroyed my budget. Road access, drainage, water systems, electrical connections, permits, environmental reviews, survey work. Every time I thought I understood the total cost, another bill appeared. One month I spent nearly $26,000 solving problems that nobody visiting the property would ever notice. It felt like setting cash on fire. Meanwhile, Jason's coffee business continued growing. Every family gathering became unbearable. Relatives constantly compared us. Jason had opened a new location in Boulder. Jason had hired new executives. Jason had increased revenue. Jason had bought a lake house. Jason had purchased a new Mercedes. And what was Emily doing? Living in a trailer. On empty land. Chasing a dream. Nobody said it directly. Again, they didn't have to. You learn these things from expressions. From silence. From pity. Pity is often worse than criticism. Criticism can motivate you. Pity makes people think you've already lost. The first major fight with my father happened at Thanksgiving. November 2019. I drove back to Denver covered in dust after spending 10 straight hours supervising contractors. The moment I arrived, I knew something was wrong. My father wanted to talk. Whenever parents say they want to talk, grown children immediately become nervous. Age doesn't matter. The reaction never changes. We sat alone in his study. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, he sighed. You don't have to prove anything. I already knew where the conversation was heading. I'm not trying to prove anything. Then why are you doing this? I laughed, not because it was funny, because I couldn't believe the question. You gave Jason a business worth millions. His jaw tightened. You were given something too. 47 empty acres. His expression hardened. What exactly are you trying to say? The answer had lived inside me for more than a year. You never thought I could succeed. Silence, not denial. Silence. That hurt more, because silence confirmed everything. Finally, he spoke. I was trying to be realistic. Realistic, the same word people use when they don't believe in someone? I stood. The conversation was over. Neither of us apologized. Neither of us changed our minds. For nearly 18 months afterward, our relationship never fully recovered. The breakthrough arrived in spring 2020. Not because of luck. Not because of genius. Because of observation. I had spent months studying traffic patterns and visitor behavior throughout rural Colorado. Something kept appearing in successful locations. People wanted experiences, not products. Experiences. Families wanted places to spend entire afternoons. Tourists wanted destinations. Social media had changed everything. Beautiful locations generated attention. Attention generated visitors. Visitors generated revenue. The realization transformed my entire strategy. The property would not become a traditional agricultural operation. It would become a destination, a place people intentionally traveled to visit. The concept expanded rapidly. Berry fields, seasonal festivals, farm-to-table events, wedding venues, local artisan markets, outdoor concerts, corporate retreats, family activities, photography locations. Every idea supported every other idea. For the first time, the numbers became exciting. Not small exciting, life-changing exciting. If the concept worked, that if still mattered. But now success felt imaginable. Construction began that summer. Then disaster struck. A contractor disappeared with nearly $47,000. Just vanished. No completed work, no refunds, no explanation. I spent 3 weeks speaking with lawyers. Another month trying to recover funds. Almost nothing came back. Losing that money nearly destroyed the project. Several nights I sat alone in the trailer, staring at financial projections that no longer worked. I considered quitting. Not once, many times. The romantic version of entrepreneurship leaves those moments out. The truth is uglier. Sometimes success is simply refusing to quit one more day. Then one more. Then another. I kept going, mostly because failure would prove everyone right. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. The grand opening happened on September 18, 2021. More than 2 years after I first stood on the property. More than 2 years after everyone dismissed the land as worthless. I expected maybe a few hundred visitors. We received over 2,000. The parking areas filled completely. Local news stations arrived. Food vendors sold out. Families stayed for hours. The farm market generated nearly $31,000 in sales during the first weekend. I remember walking across the property near sunset. Children were running through open fields. Couples were taking photographs. Live music echoed from the event lawn. Everywhere I looked, people were smiling. For a moment, I stopped moving. Just stood there, watching, listening, breathing, because for the first time since my father's birthday dinner, I felt vindicated, not successful, not rich, just vindicated. The land was no longer empty, and neither was my future. What I didn't realize was that the first successful season would trigger something far more dangerous than failure ever had. Attention. And once the property began attracting attention, Jason started paying attention too. For the first time, and that would eventually become a very expensive mistake. Success changes people. That is what most people say. What they rarely mention is that success also reveals people. It reveals who supported you when nobody believed. It reveals who secretly hoped you would fail. And it reveals who suddenly appears the moment your hard work becomes valuable. I learned all 3 lessons during 2022. The business exploded. There is no other word for it. What began as a seasonal attraction on 47 forgotten acres became one of the fastest-growing agritourism destinations in Colorado. The first year generated just under $740,000 in revenue. The second year generated $2.3 million. By the end of 2022, we employed 32 people. We hosted weddings nearly every weekend. Corporate retreats booked months in advance. Local schools organized field trips. Families drove from Denver, Colorado Springs, Boulder, and Fort Collins. More importantly, something happened that nobody in my family had anticipated. The land itself became extraordinarily valuable. The state approved the highway expansion project. Traffic increased. Commercial developers started buying nearby parcels. Property values surged. In less than 4 years, the 47 acres my father had valued at roughly $312,000 were now being appraised between $11 million and $14 million. The first time I saw the appraisal report, I read it 3 times, then a 4th. Then I sat quietly in my office for almost an hour. Not because of the money, because of what it represented. Proof that everyone had been wrong, including me. The first offer arrived in March 2023. A development group offered $9.8 million. I declined. The second offer was higher. I declined again. I wasn't interested in selling. The property wasn't just an asset anymore. It was my life, my future, the physical evidence of every sacrifice I had made, every sleepless night, every risk, every dollar, every insult. You don't sell something like that easily, especially when you built it yourself. Around that same time, Jason's problems began. At first, nobody knew. The family certainly didn't. Social media still showed vacations, new vehicles, business conferences, perfect smiles. But behind the scenes, his coffee company was struggling. Consumer habits were changing. Operating costs were increasing. Several expansion projects had failed. Debt accumulated. Margins shrank. Some locations performed poorly. For years he had relied on the momentum my father created. Now he was discovering something difficult. Running a successful company and inheriting a successful company are not the same thing. The first warning sign came during Christmas dinner. Jason seemed distracted, irritable, short-tempered. At one point he asked a question that immediately caught my attention. "Have you ever considered selling?" The table became quiet. I looked at him. "No. You could retire tomorrow." "I don't want to retire." He nodded. But I could see disappointment. At the time I didn't understand why. I would soon learn. 3 months later he called me. For the first time in years, he sounded nervous. Not arrogant, not confident, nervous. "We should meet." I almost laughed. Jason never wanted to meet unless he needed something. We met at a restaurant in Denver. After 10 minutes of small talk, he finally got to the point. "I need investors." I leaned back. "What kind of investors?" "Strategic partners." Whenever business people start using vague language, bad news usually follows. Eventually, the truth emerged. His company owed millions. Several lenders were pressuring him. Expansion loans had become a burden. Cash flow was deteriorating. He needed capital. Quickly. Then he said something that changed everything. "You should invest." I genuinely thought he was joking. "I should what?" "Invest." He slid documents across the table. I looked at them. He wanted several $1,000,000 in exchange for a minority ownership position. I stared at him. For years he had mocked my project. For years he had treated my success like a lucky accident. And now he wanted me to save him. I pushed the papers back. "No." His face changed immediately. The politeness vanished. "What do you mean no?" "I mean no. You have the money. I also have a business." His jaw tightened. "You're my sister." I couldn't help smiling. A sad smile, not a happy one, because suddenly family mattered. Now that he needed something, family mattered. I stood. The meeting was over. "You inherited 12 coffee shops," I said quietly. "You should be able to figure it out." Then I left. The lawsuit arrived 6 months later. I wish I could say I was surprised. I wasn't. Deep down, I think I always knew it might happen. The claim was almost unbelievable. Jason argued that our father had intended the property to remain a family asset. He claimed the land's dramatic appreciation had created an unfair imbalance. He claimed certain conversations, proved my father never intended me to benefit alone. The legal argument was weak. Extremely weak. But lawsuits are not always about winning. Sometimes they are about pressure. Pressure to settle. Pressure to negotiate. Pressure to surrender. Jason assumed I would panic. He assumed I would compromise. He assumed I would give him something. He assumed wrong. The legal battle lasted nearly 10 months. My attorneys were thorough, painfully thorough. Every document was reviewed, every transfer examined, every signature verified, every communication analyzed. And the deeper everyone looked, the clearer the truth became. The property belonged to me. Entirely. No restrictions. No shared ownership. No hidden agreements. No conditions. Just ownership. Pure and simple. Meanwhile, another fact became impossible to ignore. My father had knowingly transferred the land outright. The same father who once claimed I wasn't an entrepreneur. The same father who believed I lacked business instincts. The same father who had underestimated me completely. Ironically, his own paperwork became the strongest evidence supporting my position. The final hearing took place on a rainy morning in May 2025. Jason sat across the room, older, more tired, less confident. For the first time in our lives, he looked uncertain. The judge reviewed the evidence, asked questions, listened carefully. Then came the decision. Brief, direct, final. The claim was dismissed. Completely. No ownership rights. No compensation. No entitlement. Nothing. The property remained mine. Exactly as it had always been. I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt strangely calm, because the lawsuit had never really been about land, or money, or ownership. It was about something much older. Recognition. For years, everyone assumed Jason's success was earned, while mine was impossible. The courtroom simply forced reality to catch up. After the hearing, my father approached me outside. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. He looked older than I remembered, much older. Finally, he said something I had waited years to hear. I was wrong. Just 4 words. Simple, late, but honest. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I believed him. I know. His eyes became glassy. I never thought. He stopped, then started again. I never thought you would build all of this. I smiled. Neither had I. Not at the beginning. Not when I stood alone on that empty property years earlier. Not when banks rejected me. Not when contractors disappeared. Not when relatives laughed. Not when everyone assumed I had received the worthless inheritance, because that was the lesson nobody understood. The land was never the gift. The opportunity was. Jason inherited success. I inherited the chance to create it. And those are not the same thing, not even close. Today, the property is worth more than $20 million. Thousands of families visit every year. Hundreds of weddings have taken place there. Dozens of employees support their families because the business exists. And every now and then, I drive to the highest point on the land and look across the fields. I think about that birthday dinner, the applause, the assumptions, the certainty that my brother had won. Then I look at everything surrounding me. And I smile, because sometimes the best inheritance isn't the thing everyone wants. Sometimes it's the thing everyone else is foolish enough to ignore.